Hello. I don't know if this works. Ah, yeah. It kind of works, doesn't it? Good. All right, so I was here a couple of years back, I think it was 3 years ago, and I showed a little bit of, what we did in terms of USD. You guys know what USD is, right? At this point in time, I believe everyone should know. Can you raise your hands if you know what USD is for? Yeah? So no one knows. This is going to be boring then. Okay, at least it's a good story around, what my Bifrost USD workflows are currently. And, for us people who are working at home, we don't have a render farm, you're going to enjoy this because you're going to be putting together short films in no time thanks to Unreal Engine. This is the example we're going to be building. It's pretty straightforward, actually. And I'm going to be using Cargo for this, so I'm not procedurally building anything. I'm a lazy boy, so I stay at home and download stuff. So I take whatever I can from the internet. But first, before I start, I need to kind of understand what USD structure is, terminology, and compositions. So if you want to learn a little bit more about USD, I encourage you just to scan that little thing there, because you'll find a lot of information in regards to how USD works. But the terminology is why we need a specific structure within the files. And this is quite important, and this is key. Organization is key. And what you see here is basically that. So we have a machine, a K machine, and you see that it has like a proxy and a render. That's a mesh, basically, right? So when you're putting together amazing, huge scenes, you need to be able to see them in a viewport and have some sort of a memory-efficient way to display that stuff. So that's why we need this. And these are core purposes. And then you have things like scopes, where we put groups in. Then you have other things, have a bunch of stories inside of USD, like the fact that you can also put variants, like different versions of that model, and compile everything into one big asset, which we call entities or assemblies, right? So in this one, I'm going to talk about the complexity of these assets, because you can put together all of you in one big asset, and call it an asset, and then just rearrange this room procedurally, like Roland showed you before. So in this case, I'm just going to show you. Oh, that was too fast. Yeah, it was extremely fast. Let me click. There you go. So as you see here in this scene, we have 12 different groups. Each one of these groups has a tent. This tent has been made out of different components. These components could be whatever. It could be just a crate. It could be barrels. It could be fruits. It could be whatever you want. Right? There's tons and tons of assets that you see inside of here. You might call them 12 assets. Maybe in your pipeline, the studio that you work with, maybe you have 1,200 assets. I call it one entity. And that's a much faster way to find stuff even. And I'll explain how you find stuff later with the asset resolver, but it's a way to work. So when it comes to asset preparation, again, you first need to define the purpose of that asset. What's this asset going to do? And how many different versions of this asset do I want to have? So in this case, I have a render, proxy guide, and then I have all these variant sets, which are called composition arcs. So if we had to recap, what are we going to put together here? So all this stuff here, just 12 different assets made out of 500 or maybe 1,200 different other assets. So that would be kind of hectic, kind of difficult to find out what is what and how am I going to put this together. It's quite difficult sometimes. But before we start, we need to understand that whenever you work, even if you're going to go to a Unreal Engine and slap nanite 100 zeros, you still need to make sure that your face count is kind of, be aware of that. So for that, we have like a retopology in the cloud system. This is new. This is already in Maya 2026. I believe you would have access to all the version of Maya if you don't have Maya 2026. Maybe you guys have blenders, and I don't know, but if you do, you can access it. It's pretty straightforward. You just go into the flow. There's a flow menu now. There's a new menu that you can find. And if you just go there, you have an option to create a job. It's kind of like a deadline situation where all you have to do is just, hit the submit, and then you can define where you want to save these stories, your retopologies. Eventually, you have to be organized, so maybe call it retop or put all that stuff in there. It doesn't really matter, but it is important for organizational purposes. And you have all these little attributes that you can change to adjust your melody. I think it was the mic, it was just too low. And then just adjust, and send it to the farm. Once you send it, you have a job monitor where you can see exactly whether it's been scheduled, whether it's ready, whether it's not ready. Well, whereabouts is my job going? And then, yeah, once you have it done, you can retrieve it back. So you see, you don't have to retouch it. At least for these purposes, you don't have to do it yourself. So you have to do all them assets and then just import them back into the scene and start prepping. Another way you can optimize stuff is just the reduce. And I like to do this one because you can set a bunch of different objects and just reduce them in one go, delete the history, and you're ready to start putting together. So as you can see here, it's just a bunch of different assets. Maybe I have 1,000 and I want to reduce them all. You have that challenge. You can do it now with just one click of a button. So just click, reduce all of them at once, and you're ready to go. Now, we're going to talk about USD export options. How do I get this to Unreal Engine? That's just the whole point of this talk, right? So there's two caveats here, and I think this is important that you all guys know, because Maya is a very old software like me and Roland. And after 20 years of putting together a lot of stuff, there's a lot of legacy stuff. So that's why I want to show you this stuff. Today, in Maya 2026, this stuff keeps coming down. Now, the Open PBR shader is the new shader. So I don't know if you heard about Open PBR. So it's a physically based render solution for shading that is being done alongside with Adobe. Adobe and Autodesk, we've been working on this for a very long time now, so it's quite a good thing. But it's important that you guys know that whenever you're going to be working and expecting to send stuff to Unreal Engine, you might be safer just using OpenPBR instead of any other shading technology. So here's how you can do it. You don't have to do it by hand. We have a tool that converts everything automatically for you if you maybe working with Arnold. So you can see it looks even much better in the viewport when you do so. So it's just one click, and here again, there's not just one mesh. There's like 50 different meshes that conform this other entity here, which is the building. And that's it. That's pretty much. Now, going back to exporting. Exporting to the USD is super easy. Now we have even different types of options. So when you want to send this stuff to, say, Unreal Engine or Houdini or whatever that is, you see you have the export options. And one thing I want you to take into account, you have the Arnold options. If you're staying within Arnold, you can do that. But if you have your own plugins in the studio, you can also have access to the API, so you can create your own configurations for your plugins. Is that through the universal front end inside of USD. So notice that I have materials selected because I already have them, because I got them from Cargo, so I don't need to worry about that. So I'm just going to do assign materials only, make sure that everything's like this. And also make sure you convert before, so this stuff works inside of Unreal Engine. And that's it. You're good to go. Now you can export every single asset to Unreal Engine. It's that fast, it's that easy. We made it easy. Before that wasn't easy. You would have done a lot of things just to get this asset ready for Unreal Engine. One thing you need to make sure, if you're not going to be working inside of the USD state, if you're going to import it in only, then you need to add this new pipeline flags, basically. It's an interchange feature flag for Material X. That's one. And then there's the interchange feature flag also for USD. You just need to set it to true instead of Unreal Engine. That's from Unreal Engine 5.3, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And you're good to go. Next thing you can do is basically, if you go, I don't know if you already have tried this, but in the past when you try to load a USD stage instead of Unreal Engine, you will get all sort of errors, all sort of issues. But now it's just pretty straightforward. Once you load it, you'll see you have the asset. And you're going to notice now, before I exported this, and I didn't really tick on the axis nor units. So Unreal Engine doesn't know what the units are, so it just makes it very tiny. So I'll show you later how to fix that, so you don't have to run into these problems. But the asset translates pretty well. Then you can start working on this, right? But the whole point of this is that maybe you want to work inside of Maya. You have a big team of people, maybe doing some models in Blender, maybe doing something in a different software. Maybe you have Houdini people working on some VFX, and you want to have your entire pipeline of people working together, simultaneously and collaboratively on these assets. So that's what we're going to do now. But before we go into that stage, I want to show you some of the things that we've done so it's easier for everybody to collaborate. One of them is the duplicate USD options that exist inside of Maya. And this one's pretty good because we didn't have that before. So the whole plugin, I've been working on this a lot, so you guys don't have to worry about the little things. And you can see here, now we have options directly. So if you want to work, say you're a modeler, you want to send this stuff to USD, you have everything on virtual memory. You don't have to worry about all the rest. Just send it directly to your USD stage that you've created. And everything gets all sorted for you. So all these scopes, everything, all the organizational part, it's done. So all you have to worry about is to work, make it look nice, make the assembly, do whatever you need to do in order to make it look the best you can in the whatever little time you have. Because normally, nowadays, that's how it works. One thing you want to notice here is this, I'm coming from an older version of Maya, so which is, I think it was 2022. So I don't really get to see none of the shaders and all the stuff in there just because, again, I didn't do the conversion. So this is kind of my way to tell you the do's and don'ts today. And again, Maya's an old version, the old package, so you'll be finding a lot of these issues. It's not the Maya sucks. It's just that's very old, and there's a lot of legacy stuff. So it's just understanding, that there's legacy, and you need to kind of know where the issues coming from, so you don't blame me for your stuff not working, right? Or Roland, for that matter. So one of the things that you might encounter is the binding issues sometimes when it works on USD. So if you're working with older version of Maya, there are certain parts where Maya's going to break. Especially little things when interacting with the Material X is the fact that an image is composed of 4 different say channels, right? So RGBA. So vector 3, vector 4 is how we call them. But this translation didn't happen before. We didn't understand that. So we kept the old pipeline. So we didn't break all the jobs that you might have or studios around the world, but also had a new solution in place. When you work with the Arnold plugin, it's the same thing. So this is the case when working with the Arnold plugin. You're going to see that if I don't export, for example, in working with USD, and if I don't choose the USD preview surface when exporting, even though I have the Arnold configuration and everything's done, I have not checked intentionally the USD preview surface shader. So what's going to happen is just you're not going to see anything in the viewport because it's a different type of data. So the data model is totally different. So it's not that Maya doesn't work, it's a different data model. So you need to understand that data models that we handle today, USD, have nothing to do with Maya. Like, even if you open any other package, the USD data model is totally new. And so we are all working together to make it as efficient as possible. Even though you didn't see in the viewport, all the bindings are there, and it's still going to render, but you're not going to see it because USD only understands USD words. It's like speaking French and Italian, so you have to speak the same language, right? Now, let me talk about a plugin that we've been writing. It's actually quite exciting because USD can be very cumbersome, very difficult, to understand, even the terminology. But why this, why that? How to put together this proxy and all these variants. It's kind of complicated. And today, there's different ways of doing it. But we have put together this series of plugins or series of tools that you can find. But you need to be exposed. They're not exposed because they're not for the faint-hearted. This is for the people, actually pipeline people, who need to put this stuff together. So you have this my module path. You input it, and you get access to this. But the good thing is, things are getting very simple, very simplified. So you can get, from a selection, you can take this and create a procedural USD stage. So if you want to work in a procedural world, you can do it. You just send it to the stage. So you have a bunch of tools. We just send it to the stage. And what would have taken you maybe a little bit of time to set up, it gets done for you automatically on this other side. So everything is being taken care of. But on top of that, there's a live connection between the Maya data and the USD data. Remember, these are two different types of data that we're handling here. So everything gets organized, everything gets put together for you. You don't have to worry about anything. The only caveat is no textures are sent. Not yet, but that's not a problem really, because if you work in a strict pipeline where you first do the model, then the shaders, then that, and that's normally quite linear, and then it gets parallel, there will be a problem. So let me show you about that live connection. But before I go there, there's one thing, if you're not coming from the Maya world, you can organize a file very simply by just adding custom attributes. So once you have those custom attributes added, in this case, the asset resolver, which is in USD, is kind of a system that knows exactly what is what is the component, what is a variant, what is a purpose, all the stuff, it will do it for you automatically. You just need to understand, okay, all I need to know is this structure. So I'm going to show you here pretty quickly. And well, you can also do materials, by the way. So if you have in a pipeline where you have 1,000 or 3,000 materials and they need to be rebuilt, maybe you're working with all the studios overseas, maybe you're working with people in India or China, and they need to rebuild everything, as long as you keep this structure and these attributes, custom attributes, they're going to get connected automatically because of the asset resolver. And this is kind of a fairly simple sphere example that I created just to show what that means. And it refers back to what USD terminology is trying to teach you, is that you need to keep everything in order. See, I have a geometry, which is the type or kind of component, that I have a mesh, and then I have named sphere and render. Sphere is the component type, and render is the purpose. That's it. Then all you need to say is, okay, this is the USD kind. Add those couple of attributes over there, and and as you see, it's a simple string. That's it. So it's just a naming convention kind of thing. And once I have that done, all I need to do is put the type. In this case, it's a scope, which is basically a group. It's just what I was saying, referring to terminology is important, and you tell it that's what that is. And so whenever you export this and then you bring it back, all this the composition of that specific asset or the assembly is going to get done automatically. All you have to remember is, okay, I have to do group, component, purpose, under a group, which is the scope, so USD understand what the prim is, right? So anything mesh, light, camera, instead of the USD world, it's called a prim or a primitive. So that's all you need to understand. And the component, everything is done automatically. All you need to do is say, okay, I want to instantiate this. I want to make 1,000 copies or 1 trillion copies of it. That's all you need to check, and that's it. It can also be done automatically. One thing that is pretty cool about this way of working is that you keep, again, live connection. So now say you're a modeler, you're also working alongside with the texture artists, you've been changing stuff. Anything that you do in the modeling department is going to get reflected, and then you can see I'm changing stuff, and it is getting automatically updated on the other side, which is the USD file. So that's pretty cool. And not just that, also, we have done all the necessary callbacks. So if you have to rearrange, change stuff, maybe somebody told you, that's not the real name, bro, you suck, change the name. You have to organize everything. Doesn't really matter. Normally you would have to export, re-export, all the stuff. In this case, all the callbacks, again, are done for you. So that was a little bit difficult to do, so please appreciate. That took a very long time to do. But it's a stupid thing, but it does help a lot when you're structuring the pipe, when you're doing these type of changes. The one that I really appreciate the most is the fact that creating variants out of USD is very time consuming. So now again, I'm going to refer to this stupid example. I would never recommend doing it like this because it's just a cool demo. But as you can see, remember all those stuff that I showed you at the beginning? I'm just going to select this, and we're going to create a huge, huge asset with all these variants inside of it. So that's the cool part. Now imagine you've been tasked to create a stadium with 1,000 people cheering. That could be done with just one asset, just one guy. Just spread it around and just change those variants, and as simple as that. So this one I wouldn't recommend because it takes a little bit of time, and you see huge amount of nodes gets created. But the cool part is you don't have to do it. So if you want to start this way, please be my guest. But all the variants and everything, as you can see, gets stored there. All you need to do is right-click, and you'll find all of them, placed where they should be. So that's pretty cool. Now, I just want to talk about the component creator. This is another part of the tool that is pretty amazing. It's the fact that you can put together all these assets, also like define purpose, define what it is, variant, all that stuff pretty quickly. But before we do that, it's understanding how that works. So this is a simple asset. So it's 3 jogs with 3 proxies in 3 guides, right? So this is as simple as just giving it the name. The name is the component, the G is the variant, and this is the purpose. This is the scope, this is the mesh, again. And it happens to all the rest. And you'll see why I'm doing this. It's just to help USD Asset Resolver to understand what this asset is being composed of. And if before I start setting up, I also want to make sure that everything's being cleaned up, that all the stuff is zeroed out, that these components are not with the pivot somewhere else. That's important because that sometimes happens, like this here. It happened to me, so it might happen to you too. It's just about cleaning up all this stuff. And once you're done, all you need to do, and everything through this Bifrost plugin has nothing to do with Maya. This is a separate entity, a separate system entirely. You see, I want to export those and de-export it because it uses the asset resolver. You understand that this is a component. It understands the purposes. It also understands the variant name. It also gives me the asset version so I can start iterating, going up and down, like whatever. So in this case, it's going to be just the asset version is going to be 01. And obviously, unfortunately, you have to go one by one because that's how we expect you to work. We don't expect you to create 30 models at the same time. So I just happen to have them, right? So it's just export, 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 and you're good to go. And you export in each one of them as it's been resolved. So you don't have to worry about naming anything. You don't have to worry about nothing. It's just about getting all the stuff there. And once that's done, then you go grab that component creator. And I'm sorry you can't see the menu, but it is there, I swear. It's called Bifrost USD, and that's all. And then you have the component creator. And all you have to do is just go find where that asset lives. I'm just going to go find a jog. And I don't even need to worry about the versions, because if there are 10 versions, it'll resolve to the latest, and it'll do the latest version. Doesn't really matter. And then you see here, I have like another contextual menu that goes on top where I can define which one is the default variant or the default version of that asset. And then I can also default to, say, a render or a proxy or a guide. This is just so if you're going to have 10,000 of these jogs laying around, you might want to use a guide instead of the full the mesh, because otherwise, the memory is going to collapse and all this stuff. So it's about keeping all that order. And you can also access it through the outliner, so it's cool. If you'd rather have it that way, you also have it there. And for the purposes, I don't know if you did know this, but that goes to the attribute or under the shape. You can also access that there. Not a lot of people know this and get lost, within Maya sometimes, but there you go. You can also add some mesh properties. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do here. You can graph it in Bifrost, and yeah, you need coffee, man. Sleeping. He's sleeping on my talk. I'm going to take a picture. I'm going to tell my boss. So one thing that is important also is the fact that you cannot save this through the Maya regular menu. You have to save it through the contextual menu, so the Bifrost one. And see, you go here, and you have an option just to save this. And it's going to pretty much take care of everything for you. Not just going to save the file. It's going to write all the Python necessary data. So you don't have to worry about this very tedious job of writing stuff. It's kind of like using AI, but it's not. I hope that translates good. Yeah? So, again, going back to that stupid asset, this huge asset, you wouldn't do that like this. So that's a little bit cumbersome. That I would not advise going doing that way. Although the other way of doing it is through Python, obviously. So that's one way. Python, you would go ahead and say, for example, create a new USD stage, then define the root prim, create the variant set, define all those variants, create purpose, all this stuff. And it takes a while. It takes a while. Another way of doing that is through, that was me like 5 years ago. I was a little bit thinner back then. But you have a full series on how to put together this stuff. And I put together this full city of machines just with one asset and one component, and I built this entire thing. So there are pretty cool ways of using USD. And I cannot cover everything because it's too much time. I only have 40 minutes, unfortunately. Or fortunately, because that would be too boring just to be here with me 3 hours. That'll be crazy. So now, in order for this to translate well to Unreal Engine, we need to understand about data types inside of, when creating materials. So we have two data types today. We have the Material X and we have the USD. Both of them are going to be living inside of LookDevX, which is our new hypershade, re-engineered. Looks like Bifrost, but it's not. And you see here you have the two data types. You have USD and Material X. You have a bunch of different nodes you can create. You can even add them to your favorites. You can do a lot of stuff. Yeah? And yes, we're going to start with Material X for Maya data. So this is the very first one. And I'm not going to go cover pretty much everything, because, again, it takes a long time. So, again, take a snap of that if you're interested, obviously. If not, this all in the YouTube channel. So you can go grab it on the YouTube channel. This is Maya Learning channel. And there's a lot of information now. People don't know that, apparently. I'm sad to know. But basically, it's pretty easy, right? So you have your Maya data. So you're not in USD world yet. You can assign now a material directly from the outliner. And we're going to concentrate on OpenPBR, which is the one we're going to be using. Once you do that, automatically you get a new, what we call a material stack, which is just a folder where you can store all the materials that you create, just to keep everything nice and tidy. Make sure you don't get, you don't lose any of those materials along the way. Give them the name, which is very important. And the cool part is that if you right-click on top of your material, which is the tent, you can create a new tab instead of LookDevX, and you can implode, you can start working on that, you can add materials, you can add shaders, textures, you can do whatever you want. And we have 4 viewports now. We have the viewport 2.0, we have the Hydra, which is OpenGL, which is basically, all rasterization methods. We have Hydra Arnold, which is a delegate, so you can also do path tracing. And then we have the Arnold. And these are all working together, so it doesn't really matter. It depends on what you're doing. Say you're setting up a shader that is too complicated, that requires path tracing, then you have that delegate for you to view your USD or Maya. So anything will work now, and it's also so much faster than before. And I think this is repeating. One thing you want to do, I don't know, because I started talking too much, I don't know if you saw, but you can export this at the end. You can export that as a Material X. Save it in the folder, whatever. You can create a library of materials, basically. I think that's where I'm going now. Yeah. So when working inside of USD, so we already saved that as a material library. So you do the same thing. You want to make sure, obviously, this kind of the steps, so you don't make a mess out of your stuff. Do not include materials when you send this stuff back into USD, or when you merge into USD. And it's fairly simple, really. Once you have those materials created, it's like the same thing. You create a USD file. You basically create a scope, which is a group for a material that cannot move, obviously, so doesn't have any translations. And then you just add or reference in that material that you already exported before. And as Material X context, basically. So that's pretty good. And you can select there whatever, settings you need. But in this case, I'm going to have the two data types. So on this side, you see I have the Maya data type with Material X, and on the other side, I have a USD data type with the Material X USD shader that is being created. So I can assign that directly, and if I render both data types, and remember these are different, they're going to be still working together inside of Maya. That doesn't really happen in any other software. So that's Maya only situation. So you can be working with your Maya data and still have your USD data on the side and make sure that everything translates the way it should translate. And that's super key if you're going to be taking this out to, say, Houdini, or you're going to take it out somewhere else. That's super important. And then the created USD material is pretty much the same process. There's nothing really ridiculously different about it. It's just create the same material stack, but on the other side, basically. And it does create, in this case, instead of material stack, it created a material scope instead of USD. That's the only difference. You can see it here. And now you can apply it, you can do changes, you can save it, you can export. Same story as before, but in USD data. So for binding and organizational purpose, this is important because imagine now you're working, and the whole point of working USD is you can work with other people at the same time, basically in parallel. That's the whole point. And then you have this composition engine, and then you have all this pretty cool stuff. So whenever you do the bindings, now say you have this, and there's 3 people involved now. So you have the modeler, the shader artist, and maybe the lighter, or someone else, a rigger. So you want to make sure that the bindings happen on a different layer. This is what Roland did before for his building. So it's the same here. So you have created 2 layers. One's going to be just for materials or storing materials, and the other one's going to be to storing the bindings of those materials. So those connections are going to live there. So that's the only purpose of this. So people can work together without breaking each other's work. That's the whole point. As you can see, if I turn it off, you see here how the material disappears and then goes back in because the bindings happen on a different layer. So that's the beauty of USD, having everything separate, non-destructive way of work. That's what you want at the end. And if you really want to know more, I don't know if you guys follow Arvi Schneider. So he's a pretty nice guy, by the way. So he knows a lot about shading. I don't know anyone here is a shading artist or texture artist, but he's amazing. And he explains the whole procedure, like a lot better than I do. Then there's Derek. Derek, he has a tool that is pretty cool, this one over here, that automates a lot of the exporting process. So if you have, you want to make all the materials and maybe put together all the textures into one folder, he does pretty much everything for you. So I also recommend follow Derek because he's a pretty cool guy and his stuff is quite good. Now, in terms of AI, if you wanted to use AI, we have done a new compound, so you can work with AI inside of LookDevX. It's ethically collected, all the data is being licensed, so no worries about that. You can use it. It's based on the Getty image data model, so it's all pulled from Getty images. But the nice thing about it is you can create your own materials here. So say you need maybe a texture of whatever, stone wall. And it creates a stone wall, but it also generates a PBR texture. It's a material generator, basically, and an HDRI generator as well. So it's kind of a safer. Sometimes you can't find a texture. You can just ask AI to make it for you and use it and be happy. Now, in terms of my USD plugin, there's a lot of new stuff that we added as well. And remember back when I was showing you in USD instead of Unreal Engine, how that tiny model was. It was so tiny instead of Unreal. It's because I didn't check this unit conversion thingy when I was exporting. It also lives over here. This guy is showing it to you. So same with the relative pathing. That's quite important. So it's there, so you know. Another thing that is quite important now is the fact that we didn't have this before, and I don't know why I keep clicking where it's not. Now you can find stuff. Like the data, again, data model is different. So before you couldn't find any of these prims, now you can find them inside of the outliner. Just type and search and find, and everything's pretty cool. You can, be happy. Another thing that is pretty important is now we have a light link collection widget. So there's collections inside of USD. You can collect stuff, collect data, put it together in a container, and use it as much as you want, as you like. In this case, we're using it for lightning. Exclusion, inclusion, and all the stuff. So in this example, I just have a light. Basically, this is a USD light, by the way. This is not a Maya light. It's a USD light. And you see on the side now I have this light link collection widget. Basically, you can either pin it and just grab anything from your scene and just put it in there, and then just render. So at this moment, everything is rendering. No problem. But see, I'm going to grab that tent, and just put it, it's middle mouse, grab, throw it in there, and now that's not going to be lit by that light, basically. So it's just a nice way of, also doing your lighting inside of Maya and USD world, while you can have all the teams working on other things, And this is also going to translate to Unreal Engine because it's a USD data type. And you can do, imagine now you have 1,000 assets. You can do expressions as well by collecting just the print path. I mean, you can specify exactly what you want to include or exclude by using just little expressions. That is as simple as just specifying the path on top, and that's it. And here, all I did was eliminate the shadow. That's all. And then the expression is pretty simple. The print path, basically, my default print path was this one on top. So that's the name. So I just need to copy that and see. It kind of looks like a Windows path, basically. And then I'm just going to say whatever is called main or whatever is called this, I don't want to be included. So whatever with the name main, it's not going to go. And that's a fairly simple way of doing it. While I was working with Disney, we had struggled with this in the past because we didn't have a way to collect all this data. That's the only reason why the collection inside of USD, it was very important to have, because now it's just a case of a string input. It's a name, and then just everything gets resolved and everything gets nice and tidy. Another thing that is pretty important now, in the world of USD, anything that is external, that is not understood by USD, we have to write what we call schemas, or a sequence of commands to the API. So, hey, this is a light, and this is how a light works. You can add exposure, you can add all this stuff. So these widgets now live inside of Maya as well. They're a little bit hidden, unfortunately. It's in the attribute here, but you can add. So in this light, I'm going to add like a volume light, basically. That's a new schema that only belongs to that USD data. And that's quite important and when you're working on this. Because now, if I render this stuff, I'll be able to see some volume, which is quite important, right? And that happens to pretty much every other attribute that exists within USD and Maya. So like, say, for example, you create a camera, and you want to add specific attributes like changes the shutter speed or whatever depth of field in that camera. Those schemas need to be specified. They need to be defined in that USD world. This is what we call definitions inside of the USD world. Yeah. And I got to pretty quickly with this, because, I've just basically, this is more informative than anything else. It's the fact that you have that now is quite important. You can also tumble around and use a camera. It sounds like, oh, wow. I mean, we couldn't do it before. Now, at least we can use a USD camera, which is a different data type, and do all the operations that we used to have inside of Maya, but in the USD world. Which is pretty cool. Just again, just add the schema, apply that schema, and that gets all done for you without having to worry about anything. See, one thing is just like this, for example, in a USD camera in the past, you couldn't do that. Like simple depth of field, simple, shutter speed angle, that kind of thing. This was a big no-no. So we're actually working to get USD to a point where it works and it behaves exactly the same. So you can use it in any other package. So it doesn't have to be Maya. It could be Unity. It could be whatever. Whatever that ingest USD. And removing those attributes goes the same thing. So you want to remove a schema, just go and remove it. As simple as that. And each time I come to this place, I have to restart this because it crashes for some weird reason. Let me start again. There you go. Well, that worked. But it's basically like that. The other thing you can do is just color code your USD data instead of the outliner, which is pretty cool. It's just that. Basically, it lives under there as the shape, basically. You just click, and you can organize by color coding, instead of the USD world. You could do this with Maya before, but you cannot do it with USD data, unfortunately. Now, talking about assembly, again, this is the part where collaboration is quite important, because here, that's where we're going to start building all the stuff and putting together, having different teams working. Like in this case, I have, for example, layout team, or I might have a lighting team, or effects team, or animation team, working on different parts of this, building this asset inside of Maya. And then we're going to send it to Unreal Engine for final rendering because it's so fast, it's so nice. So this is the part where we actually start working, and applying these workflows as a big team of people. That doesn't really matter where they are. They could be in China, they could be in another part of the world. Doesn't really matter because no one's going to step on each other's toes. Everything's going to work flawlessly, and you can be safe because you're going to have different versions. And in this case, I'm just showing pretty quickly how you can add one, specific thing. But we have a full series of how to work collaboratively instead of USD. So if you're curious, I don't know if you guys, you seem to very young to me. You might not be working at the moment in any studios, but at the point that you come to a studio, you'll be needing this So it's quite important. So everyone is shifting to USD now. And it is quite important that you understand terminology, working collaboratively. If you're thinking of applying for, in the future, a job in say a studio like, for example, I don't know, whatever, Disney. I worked for Disney for ages, and that was kind of my bread and every day. So I needed to understand this stuff. But as you can see, it's quite simple. There's no really, you can clone stuff. You can work the same way you work inside of Maya, and be happy, making a scene or making an assembly. This is how we call in the end. So all these little units of things are components, and then this big one, that's all as a whole, we call an assembly. And you can unload and load stuff as long as you reference them in as payloads, which is also one thing that we call payload is what can I load and what can I deload. So imagine now you're looking at a very big scene, you have a camera, but through the camera, you only see certain parts of that huge scene. And I refer back to Moana. Have you watched that movie? Moana. Only the parts that you see are being loaded. All the rest is unloaded. It's so you can actually work in a very more efficient way than if you don't do it, it's just going to crash. It doesn't really matter if you have a quantum computer, it's just going to crash it, most likely. I don't know. But anyways, so next steps, notice how you can lock different layers, so people's not going to step on this. These are called system locks. The system locks are very important, so especially when you're working with, say, 20 people on the same asset. So I have 20 people working on this now. You want to make sure the lighters only see the layer for lighting. You only want to see, the animators only want to see that part. You don't want them to be seeing everything, really. So those are system locks. And then I just, in this next example, so this is what we built at the end, right? So that's what we built. It was pretty much it. And you can also add, like I said, lights. You just need to make sure that this lock is turned off, or enabled on that layer, and then select that other layer. And that could be done automatically by the technical directors, basically. So using system locks, they can make sure that you don't have to worry about it as an artist, but just these locks are being taken care of for you. You don't really have to think about any of that. So in this case, it's a pretty quick example. I just added a light, and that's the only light that it's going to translate to, or they're going to take into Unreal Engine. Next. Why take it to Unreal Engine is the question, I guess. You can scan that if you want to watch the whole series. We have a full series for this. So if you want to understand into the USD workflows, there's a bunch of animating, lighting, everything, assembly, putting together components, everything's in there. But why we want to work inside of Unreal Engine, in today's world where you have very little budget, most often than not, you wouldn't have any budget, really. So you want to make sure that you take this stuff to Unreal and render it as fast as you can, right? In the best way possible. So one thing you want to make sure, you're always in the latest version of USD. Since USD is open, there's a lot of things happening. So make sure you always get the latest and greatest from the repository if it's not been added for you already. And you just need to make sure that you use USD core, USD import, multi-use, use the synchronization. All this stuff needs to be there. Anyone here who works on inside Unreal Engine? Yeah? Okay, good. Excellent. So once that stuff is enabled, you just create your USD stage actor. And that's pretty simple. Just open that stuff there. And just look for your shot. The shot that we created first. So that's this one here, called shot 01. And see how I have all the layers there. So I have the lighting. So people can still keep working on this, all the layers separately in different packages. That could be anything. That could be Houdini. That could be whatever you want to be working with, because USD, it's like a universal, kind of say language. You can still do it. And notice how that loads in a very strange way, just because Unreal Engine tells Nanite to convert all this stuff to Nanite. So you need to also specify the amount of triangles you want to load. So in this case, you see I have all the payloads, everything gets organized in the exact same way that I put it together inside of Maya. So all you need to do is worry about working now. So you have a full pipe of people working together. You have artists working on lighting, artists working on rigging, artists working on animation. You don't care. You're going to be putting this stuff inside of Unreal Engine, and whenever everything's ready, you're just going to hate render using Unreal Engine. So it's all kind of small group of people who might be working inside of Unreal Engine. You don't have to have an army of people understanding the complexities of Unreal. You know, it's just as easy as just send this stuff to Unreal and use, you know, all these capabilities that are amazing. You have to admit, Lumen is amazing. Nanite is incredible, so taking full advantage of that. I don't see why not, and it is also free as a package, right? And yeah, you can also import this stuff, obviously, into Unreal, as you saw there. Not what I would advise, unless you're super, super secure, there's no more changes. But that never happens in the real world. You always have to change stuff until the last minute. So that's why you're working on the USD world and not any other. But there you go. So now it's just about time for putting together some nice lighting, which I didn't do because I was lazy last night. And yeah, and that's it. Now you can put together, I honestly render all these sequence of shots in a span of 20 minutes, I think it was. 20 minutes, something like that. So it didn't really take that long. You can make it look so much better. But anyways, this is all I have. Just a story around USD and you know how to work, you know, inside of Maya collaboratively, and then finally take this into any other package for final rendering or whatever. So this is all I have really. So I don't know if you want to ask me anything in regards to these workflows and these techniques. Or maybe you just want to go grab a cup of coffee. Well, I do. Anyone, any questions, any worries, critiques, ideas? I'll take anything. Like I'm an old man, I can take anything, you know? At 46, I can take anything, criticism, I can take anything. Yeah, go.
On these big sets, did you encounter problems like when you import it in Unreal? How long does it take for Nanite to process these meshes? And can you do it like if it can be processed at the same time? There's some ways to split it.
Well, I have to say that was stupidly fast when I did it. Obviously, in some instances, I have to push it as much as I can have it. But I'm pretty sure you will have to work with payloads at some point, because what you can do, or the worst that could happen, is that you're going to run out of texture memory inside of Unreal Engine. That's the worst part that can happen. So in this case, I didn't have any problems until yesterday that I started adding rocks and things, and then I ran out of memory. Then in that case, you just need to unload some parts that you're not seeing, that kind of thing, you know, work that way. But you can automate that also based to camera frustum. So if you have your camera frustum, whatever you see, then load that and then unload the rest. But just to build this in, when I opened it up, it took, I don't know, maybe a couple of minutes. And then Nanite, I just had to add an extra 0 because it couldn't resolve how many triangles. So by default, it has, I think it's like 10 million triangles budget or something, because it's thinking of video games, right? So this is for film. So I just need to add another 0. You can add as many zeros as you like, and then I will just cut it like nothing. Like it really didn't take that long. And then lighting it was also pretty responsive. Like in general, it's quite responsive. It's not really, yeah. That's the beauty of it. Because you're going to be working fast. You're going to be rendering this stuff, not worrying about anything. Like, yeah. Is that it? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it for being here.